The Great Republic of the West. The secret that launched 1,000 ships. Here is a fact you were never taught in school: the very foundation of modern America, the relentless pursuit of wealth, the culture of instant reinvention, the spirit of "go big or go home," was poured in a muddy, icy stream in the desolate foothills of California, not by a seasoned prospector, but by a man who was desperately trying to build a lumber mill. On January 24, 1848, James W. Marshall, a carpenter and partner to the Swiss visionary John Sutter, knelt beside a freshly dug tail race near the American River. He was checking the water flow. The California winter air was cold enough to bite. As he squinted at the sediment, a tiny glint, unlike anything he had ever seen, caught his eye. It was heavy, malleable, and the color of pure sunrise. Marshall picked up the pea-sized nugget. He hammered it flat. He bit it. He boiled it in lye. He showed it to Sutter, who conducted a secret, desperate test using a volume displacement method described in an old encyclopedia. The verdict was undeniable. It was gold. But here is the truly astonishing part: when Marshall found that first speck of gold, California was, for all intents and purposes, still a foreign land, technically a sparsely populated Mexican territory. The treaty that formally ceded California to the United States, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, was not even signed for another 2 weeks, a cosmic coincidence that meant the greatest land heist in history happened just as its hidden treasure was revealed. The secret did not last. No secret involving unimaginable wealth ever does. It was broken, not by a greedy miner, but by an unlikely American hero named Samuel Brannan. Brannan was a brilliant, opportunistic, and thoroughly scandalous newspaper publisher and Mormon elder. He had sailed to California with a band of Mormons seeking a new Zion, only to find the promise of a more immediate paradise. Brannan had invested heavily in spades, shovels, and mining supplies. To create a market, he needed a frenzy. In May 1848, he rode through the streets of San Francisco, a tiny, sun-baked port town, holding a jar filled with the gleaming evidence and shouting, "Gold! Gold! Gold from the American River!" The town emptied within a week. Lawyers abandoned their courts, sailors deserted their ships, leaving 500 ships rotting in San Francisco Bay. Farmers left their crops to wither. The American dream, the sudden, violent upending of social order and the immediate democratization of wealth, was born in that single cry. This is not just the story of a gold rush. This is the true, untold history of how a few ounces of metal reshaped the continent, creating instant millionaires and instant slums, fueling a savage war of extermination against the indigenous people, and forging an entirely new type of American. It is the saga of the 49ers, the vigilantes, the forgotten queens of the saloons, and the secretive Big Four railroad barons who ultimately claimed the prize that the miners dug up. It is the story of the Great Republic of the West. Part 1, The Inevitable Explosion, 1848 to 1849. Chapter 1, Sutter's Folly. The discovery was a curse for John Sutter. His dream was not gold, but a feudal agricultural empire, Nueva Helvetia, New Switzerland. He employed hundreds of Native American laborers, was owed loyalty by the Mexican government, and possessed tens of thousands of acres. The moment the gold was confirmed, his vision was shattered. His Native American workforce immediately abandoned their posts for the riverbanks. His crops were left unharvested. His fortress, Sutter's Fort, was overrun by the first wave of prospectors, the locals, who stripped it bare, using his equipment, killing his livestock, and paying for nothing. The first casualty of the gold rush was the man who owned the land. Chapter 2, The Routes of Madness. The news hit the East Coast in the autumn of 1848, but it became a full-blown national obsession after President James K. Polk announced the astonishing facts to Congress in December. The following year, 1849, saw the global migration begin. The term, 49ers, was coined for this flood of humanity, who chose three main, equally perilous routes. The Overland Trail, the Great American Desert, a 2,000-mile, 6-month trek across plains, mountains, and alkali deserts. The trail was littered with discarded possessions, graves, and the bones of oxen. Facts suggest that the journey itself killed nearly 10% of those who attempted it, not from Indian attacks, which were rare, but from cholera, starvation, and accidents. The Cape Horn route, the seasickening south a 15,000-mile, 4 to 8 month voyage around the treacherous tip of South America. Hundreds of ships were lost to storms, and the passengers faced outbreaks of disease in the crowded, unsanitary conditions. The Isthmus of Panama route, the shortcut of death a three-part nightmare, sail to Panama, cross the fever-ridden, malaria-plagued jungle isthmus by mule and canoe, and then wait, sometimes for months, in the disease-soaked ports for a northbound ship. This route was the fastest but the most deadly. The true number of men who died of tropical diseases in Panama is one of the gold rush's untold tragedies. Chapter 3, The True Cost of a Nugget. The initial image of the 49er as a rugged white American pioneer is a historical fiction. The gold rush was a global phenomenon that immediately transformed California into the world's most ethnically diverse place. The Chinese miners, over 20,000 Chinese immigrants arrived by 1852, calling California Gam San, or Gold Mountain. They were industrious and often worked in highly organized companies. This success immediately bred virulent racism, leading to the infamous foreign miners' tax of 1852, which was explicitly aimed at Chinese and Mexican miners. The Chileans and Mexicans, experienced miners from the silver mines of Sonora and Chile arrived early and were incredibly skilled. They were immediately met with hostility from the American miners who considered the gold their national patrimony, leading to violent confrontations and the rapid passing of discriminatory laws. The indigenous genocide, the most horrifying consequence of the gold rush, was the state-sanctioned genocide of California's Native American population. The sudden influx of hundreds of thousands of armed, land-hungry men was catastrophic. Conservative estimates suggest that the indigenous population dropped from around 150,000 in 1848 to less than 30,000 by 1870. The state legislature even paid bounties for Native American scalps and passed an act for the government and protection of Indians, which essentially legalized Native American slavery. This dark underbelly is vital to understanding the true cost of the Golden State. Part 2, The City of Seven Hills and Sin, 1850 to 1856. Chapter 4, San Francisco Rises in Flames. San Francisco became the gold rush's crucible, a city that, by its own nature, defied the natural order. It was a chaotic, transient mess of tents, shanties, and hastily erected wooden structures. Between 1849 and 1851, the city burned down 6 times. Not just minor fires, but total conflagrations that wiped out entire districts. The citizens, however, did not flee. They simply rebuilt, often within days, using the same flammable materials, a perfect metaphor for the manic, speculative spirit of the era. The price of an egg could equal the wages of a month back east, and fortunes could be made not in the mines, but in the urban economy, speculating on land, selling water, or providing entertainment. Chapter 5, The Queens of the Comstock. While the men sought fortune in the riverbeds, women found opportunities in the cities that offered a degree of economic power unheard of back east. Lola Montez, the most famous, was the Spider Dance entertainer, a beautiful, scandalous Irish-born dancer and courtesan who had captivated European royalty. She brought an air of continental celebrity to the mud streets of San Francisco and the mining camps. Her presence signaled that California was not just a rugged frontier, but a new, cosmopolitan center of wealth and vice. The entrepreneurs, women ran boarding houses, laundries. Laundering was one of the most profitable services, as miners prioritized gold over cleanliness, and, most lucratively, saloons and brothels. Many of these women earned more in a week than a middle-class lawyer earned in a year in New York. The gold rush was a brief, brutal, but powerful moment of economic liberation for many women outside the confines of traditional society. Chapter 6, The Committee of Vigilance. The law, as established by the young American government, was utterly incapable of keeping pace with the population explosion. The mining camps were characterized by miners' law, ad hoc, communal agreements on claims. But San Francisco was a hotbed of organized crime, from the Sydney Ducks, Australian ex-convicts, to corrupt political officials known as the Hounds. The astonishing reaction was the rise of the San Francisco Committee of Vigilance. Twice, first in 1851 and then with terrifying efficiency in 1856, respectable, wealthy merchants and citizens took the law entirely into their own hands. The 1856 committee was a quasi-military force, numbering over 6,000 armed men, complete with artillery, a secret police, and a system of swift, uncompromising trials. They arrested, deported, and publicly hanged several prominent figures, including a high-profile politician and a newspaper editor, essentially overriding the legitimate government. They were, in effect, a coup d'état of the elite, establishing a new order that prioritized commercial stability over due process. The Vigilance Committee's success is a chilling piece of American history, forever linking the impulse for order with extra-legal violence in the American West. Part 3, The Transition to Empire, 1857 to 1870. Chapter 7, The Hydros of Hubris. By the late 1850s, the easy gold, the placer gold found in riverbeds, was exhausted. The next phase was not about individual luck, but industrial-scale engineering. The miners turned to the hillsides, using the most destructive mining technique ever conceived, hydraulic mining. It involved blasting enormous jets of water, often the width of a small cannon and pressurized by long, complex systems of flumes and ditches, against entire mountainsides. This pulverized the rock, washing the slurry through sluice boxes to extract the remaining gold. The scale of the environmental devastation was unprecedented. The debris field, this process dumped millions of tons of gravel, silt and rock, slickens, into the tributaries of the Sacramento River, raising the riverbeds, destroying farmland, and causing catastrophic flooding miles downstream in the Central Valley. The lawsuit, this industrial environmental disaster, was only stopped by the landmark 1884 court case, Woodruff v. North Bloomfield Mining and Gravel Company, which ruled hydraulic mining a public nuisance. It was one of the first major environmental decisions in American history. The vestiges of the destroyed landscapes remain visible today. Chapter 8, The Silver Catalyst, the Comstock Lode. Just as the California gold was playing out, a new, even more immense source of wealth was discovered in 1859 in Nevada, the Comstock Lode, a vast deposit of silver ore. This lode, technically outside California but financed almost entirely by the wealth generated in San Francisco, made the gold rush look small. The Comstock's big bonanza generated billions in modern dollars, funding the continued growth of San Francisco and solidifying its role as the financial capital of the West. It also gave rise to the legendary Bonanza Kings, and funded the construction of the infamous Sutro Tunnel, a colossal engineering project to drain the scorching hot, water-filled mines. Chapter 9, The Octopus and the Big Four. The true, lasting fortunes were not made by men with shovels, but by the handful of men who controlled the logistics, the finance, and, ultimately, the transportation. The ultimate prize, the culmination of the gold rush's wealth, was the Transcontinental Railroad. The project was spearheaded by the Big Four, a group of Sacramento merchants who transitioned from selling goods to building an empire: Leland Stanford, Collis Huntington, Mark Hopkins, and Charles Crocker. Their story is the ultimate gold rush irony. They used the government-granted land, subsidies, and the wealth of the West to finance their venture. The Chinese immigrants, brutally discriminated against in the mines, were the essential, brutally exploited labor force that laid the track through the treacherous Sierra Nevada mountains. The Central Pacific Railroad, their company, became an enormous, virtually unregulated monopoly, the octopus, that controlled the lifeblood of the entire Western economy, turning the public wealth of the gold rush into a private, self-perpetuating, financial juggernaut. Coda, the Golden Legacy. The California Gold Rush, a frenzied 5-year period of anarchy, violence, and instant fortune, permanently altered the trajectory of the United States. It accelerated the settlement of the West by decades, supplied the Union with desperately needed gold during the Civil War, and established the culture of speculation and boundless possibility that defines Silicon Valley and modern American capitalism. The promise of easy gold was a mirage for most, yet the dream of it created the very real, very rich, and forever astonishing Great Republic of the West. It was a time when the world truly turned upside down, all because a humble carpenter found a shiny pebble in the dirt.